With the help of Hashem, we are learning Rosh Hashana Daf Chaf. We left off on Daf Chaf, Amid Aleph, second line from the top of the Amid. We began learning on Daf Yutes Amid Beis that Sholchu Leila Mar Ukva, the rule that other Hasamach LeNisan, the other that comes right before Nisan, whether it is in a normal year, other, or whether in a leap year, other Sheni, is always going to be deficient. Deficient meaning that other will only have 29 days, and the 30th day will become day number 1, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And based on that, we brought a Mishnah. The Mishnah says that when Edom see the new moon, even if they live far away from Yerushalayim, that for them to go there to testify, they have to go beyond the Tchum. Now, if they saw it Friday night, says the Mishnah that for 2 months in the year, which is for the month of Nisan and for the month of Tishrei, they should violate the Tchum Shabbos and they should come to the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim. And as the Gemara we left off at the end of last year, that there is a notion that even though Beis Din will make the month today Rosh Chodesh, regardless whether witnesses come or not, in other words, Friday night is the 30th day of Adar, and now that we have a rule that we don't allow Adar to have 30 days, the 30th day will become Rosh Chodesh Nisan. They will sanctify the month regardless, but since there is a mitzvah to sanctify the month, not only based on calculations, but based on the testimony of witnesses, that justifies them being Mechalal Shabbos by going beyond the Tchum. That is where we left off yesterday. Really, as many Rishonim point out, if that would be the meaning of the Mishnah, then why do we say we're only Mechalal for the month of Nisan and the month of Tishrei? That should be a reason for the witnesses to always be Mechalal Shabbos, no matter what month is Rosh Chodesh. In other words, if there's a mitzvah for them to sanctify it, al dafka al pi edim, then they should go there regardless. We'll leave that for today. We're going to resolve this no matter what. We're going to come back and we're going to address this. And we're going to continue to focus on the above. We're going to learn reasons why one is allowed to make the month of Elul into a full month. And as we will see, Ula holds that even if the reason to add a day in a month is not for, let's say, astronomical, calculative reasons, but it's for communal needs, one is allowed, Beis Din is allowed to add to the month to address those communal needs. Ultimately, we will see that not all of the Tanoim agree with it. Ula cannot argue with a Tana, but if there's only one Tana, Das Yachid Acherim, who holds that one may never add to the days of the months for communal needs, that's something that is only allowed to be done regarding the year, whether to make the year into a leap year or not. Their community, the communal needs are very important. But when it comes to changing the days of the months, according to Acherim, we quote him already above, that he holds that every month there's going to be this cycle of 29 days, 30 days, 29 days, 30 days, always. In other words, according to Acherim, our calendar will always have 354 days, and based on that he gives certain ways of knowing what day of the week Yom Tov will fall out, and it may never be changed. That will be Chaf Amid Aleph. Chaf Amid Beis, and going from there, not only today, Daf Chaf Amid Beis, but going into tomorrow's Chaf Aleph, we're going to have what one might call really the most that we find in the Gemara regarding the Soid Ha'ibur. The word Soid means a secret. Normally when we speak about a secret, we're speaking about the esoteric part of the Torah. That's not the case when it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh. Being that the Chazal did not want for people to have a machlokes what day is Rosh Chodesh, which would really create real chaos. Imagine you have your Yom Kippur, I have my other day for Yom Kippur. So they kept this part of Torah Shebal Peh, and this is the only part of Torah Shebal Peh. It was really never properly written down by Rabbeinu HaKadosh. It was not written down properly by the Tanoim of that era, when they wrote down all of the rest of the oral Torah. What they did is that there is a Braisa, that's not even Rabbeinu HaKadosh, and it's called Soid Ha'ibur, the secret of knowing when to make the months, 29 days, 30 days, when to make years, regular years, when to make years into leap years. And even that Braisa was written very cryptically to guarantee that people will not understand what it says, other than the few that have to keep that part of the Torah passed down from generation to generation. Now, after Hillel the Minor actually understood that he is the end of the era of the Sanhedrin until the coming of Mashiach, and he established a calendar, And the calendar that he established was based on the cheshbonos that we have in Soid HaIbur and other reasons. Afterwards, there was no reason to keep it a secret, which is why the first major recorded work on the Ibur was written by the Rambam. And it's something that, Baruch Hashem, we, Lubavitcher Chabad Hasidim, we regularly learn, whether you learn it once a year or once in 3 years. But here is where you have the record of the Soid HaIbur. What we will have on Chaf Amid Beis beginning is Shmuel beginning to make a statement that Yochilna letakune lokula goyla. Shmuel said that I, Shmuel, am such an expert in all of these cheshbonos of the movements on the sun and the moon, and I also am aware of all of the justifiable reasons for the Sanhedrin to add a day or to make a month shorter for the various communal needs that justify such a change. So Shmuel says that even though they lived in Golus, in the diaspora, they did not know from the Eidim from Eretz Yisrael when the Sanhedrin established the new month, which is why we learned so much. There's a Yontav Sheni Shel Galuyos, they didn't know. Shmuel says, I know when they're going to do it. And what Shmuel was really saying, that if you live in Golus then, before the calendar, with someone like me, Shmuel, you don't have to keep 2 days Yom Tov. I know when it's going to be. When Shmuel made such a big statement that I know when for sure, so they challenged Shmuel, they quoted him one line from the Soid HaIbur, and they asked him, do you know what this means? And he said no. So they told him, if you don't know what this means, then you don't know. So you're not the Greisa expert, and no, if we're not getting a message from the Shluchim, from the Sanhedrin, we can't rely on someone's vast knowledge in the cheshbonos of how the Sanhedrin would go and establish the calendar. Just to share one nekuda, and that is, we'll speak it out more when we get there, that the moon, that from our perspective, changes in its size, because let's just say, bekitzer like this, the earth is going to be placed in the center, the moon is in the sphere right above us, the sun is in the fourth sphere above us, the sun and the moon are not traveling on the same speed, the sun is traveling approximately 1 degree a day, the moon is traveling approximately 13 degrees a day, which means the moon is outrunning the sun around 12 degrees a day. 12 times 30 is 360. When the moon is directly under the sun, from our perspective, we cannot see it because the moon only has reflective light. As the moon goes away from the sun, it becomes a little bit visible. You first only see a sliver, and then every day you see more and more of the moon until you hit the 15th of the month, where you see what we call the full moon, which is really only half of the moon. And then the moon starts going closer to the sun, and until it comes so close to the sun that it's no longer visible. So there is a period of the month, and the Gemara will tell us today, that for 24 hours, no matter where you live, with your naked eye, you will not be able to see the moon. Now, of course, during the daytime, b'chlal, the sun is going to outshine the little sliver of the moon. But you cannot see the moon for 24 hours. However, in certain areas, and that will depend on the time of the moilad. The moilad means when the moon is directly under the sun. That's called in English the conjunction. They are aligned. That is when for sure we can't see it. Theoretically, 1 second afterwards, when the moon begins to run ahead of the sun, it should have been visible, but it's not visible because so little of it is apparent. Together with other reasons, you can't see it. The minimum time needed to see the new moon is 6 hours. And by the way, the same thing is in the old moon. As the old moon is coming closer and closer to the sun, even if you are in a location where you have good visibility, you will never be able to see the old moon when it's only 6 hours from the conjunction, and even closer. But really, it's not just 6 and 6. It's 24 hours. And we'll explain why, and we'll give an example. Obviously, it depends what time is the conjunction happening. The conjunction, the moilad, happens at a given time, no matter where you are in the world. The only question is, what time will it be for you? And many other pratim, as we will start unpackaging the Soid HaIbur. But Chavra, let us start again on Daf Chaf Amid Aleph. We are in the end of the second line from the top of the Amid. Chavra halt kop. So they told MERCAVA, that was what we learned yesterday, that Adar Samach Lenisin La'olam Chaser. La'olam Chaser. That means Rosh Chodesh Nissan will be on day 30th from Rosh Chodesh Adar. It has to be that way. So the question is, it says in the Mishnah that you're Machalal Shabbos, even if you have to go beyond the Tchum for Nisan and for Tishrei, why should you be Machalal it for Nisan? When you know that Beis Din will declare it Rosh Chodesh whether witnesses come or not. So the Gemara answered, no, because of this concept that mitzvah lekadosh al hariyah, that even though Beis Din will establish, according to what we're saying right now, Rosh Chodesh, regardless, today will be declared Rosh Chodesh, because if you don't declare it today, then other will have 30 days, and other before Nisan can never have 30 days. It can never be a full month, it has to be a deficient month, but it's better for the Beis Din to establish the month Rosh Chodesh based on the testimony, and that justifies them being Mechalal Shabbos going beyond the Tchum. And again, all of the Rishonim ask, so they should be Mechalal Shabbos every time. Okay. Ikada Amri, another version that Rav Nachman did not challenge this rule that other Hasamach L'Nisan, L'Olam Chasar, from the Mishnah that we're going to have soon, but actually he brought the Mishnah as a proof. Then Amar Rav Nachman, Afanan Ametanin, I'll prove it. It says in the Mishnah, Al Shtei Chadoshim, for 2 months in the year, Mechalal L'Nesas Shabbos, when witnesses see the new moon. They see the moon, and they're far away from Yerushalayim, and going there means they have to walk beyond the Tchum. They're Mechalal the Tchum to come to the Beis Din. And what, 2 months? Nisan and Tishrei. Now here's Rav Nachman's proof. If we will agree with the statement that Nisan is always, this other Hasamach L'Nisan is always deficient. Always deficient. So let's say, guys, Friday night would be what you would call the 30th of Adar. And they have to make the next day, they have to make the day, Shabbos day, they have to declare it as Rosh Chodesh. So Mishim Hachim Echalalinon, that's why, they have to go beyond the Tchum. The mitzvah lekadosh al hariyah, even though they're going to declare it anyways Rosh Chodesh, but it's, as we just said, no, we want them to declare it based on testimony, so come, go beyond the Tchum. But if we would not agree with this rule, if we were to hold, like we had also yesterday, other opinions, that it's not a engraved in stone rule. Sometimes it's mali, sometimes it's chassid. So I don't understand something. Why should they be Mechalal Shabbos? If Friday night is the 30th, Beis Din doesn't have to make that day Rosh Chodesh, even though they saw it, but they're far away from Yerushalayim. Don't go. There won't be Eidim, and a guy's mitzvah like Kaddish al Pida Eidim. Now, of course, on day 31, if no one comes, they're going to be Mekadosh it anyways. You can't have a month longer than 30 days, a lunar month. But then there's no option. But you can push it off a day. Amay Mechalalinon. Na'abrei ho'idna, let them make that other into a ibur month, let them leave that day into the 30th, because the witnesses did not come, and they have the option of unakache lamachet. And you know what? Tomorrow they're going to sanctify based on the testimony of witnesses, because these Eidim, Matzei Shabbos, can already travel. Sunday morning they can already travel. There's no tchum on Sunday. So that's a proof. So the Gemara counters, no, it's not a proof. Because indeed, in the case that you just described, when Friday night was the 30th, you're right, hachinami. Hachinami, that what? That it should not justify being Mechalal Shabbos if you can allow other to be a full month. But hachi b'mayaskin, and perhaps the case of the Mishnah is where the ikla yom shloishim ve'echad b'Shabbos. Thursday night, Friday was the 30th. And no one saw the moon, my friends. No one saw the moon. They saw the moon Friday night. Now this day has to be declared regardless. If Eidim will come, then they'll declare it ideally based on the testimony. Since the mitzvah lekadosh al hariyah, that's why you justify Chilul Shabbos. So there's no proof from that Mishnah. Okay. Now, one thing is clear, that in order to maintain the view that we're going with right now, that other that's right before Nisan has to be deficient, you must say that the only reason why we justify witnesses being Mechalal Shabbos, even though Beis Din will declare that day Rosh Chodesh regardless, is because of the concept that there is a mitzvah to be Mekadosh the month for Beis Din to declare it Rosh Chodesh based on the sightings of the new moon by testimony, by witnesses. So on that, fragt the Gemara, Masav Rav Kahanom, it says in the Mishnah that Kesha HaMikdash Kayam, that when the Beis HaMikdash stands, Mechalal Afal Kulan. We don't say only go beyond the Tchum for Nisan and Tishrei, because the Yamam Tovim are in that month. No, for every single month. If the Eidim see the moon Friday night, you got to go to Yerushalayim. Why? I'll tell you why. Because on Rosh Chodesh you bring special korbanos, mipnei takonos hakorban, And to bring the Korban Musaf in its proper time, if you saw the new moon, then you got to go there and tell Beis Din, and then indeed you will bring the Musaf on the day that the new moon is already visible. Oh, so says the Gemara, Mida kulu lav mishum de mitzvah lekadosh al hariyah. Just like Bizman Shabeis HaMikdash Kayam, right? That's what we asked before. Why didn't you say, forget about the Beis HaMikdash? If there's a mitzvah for them to be Mekadosh al Pi Hariyah, that should justify Chilul Shabbos. No, we're not saying that. It's because the Musaf has to be brought on time. So from that we can extrapolate that even Nisan and Tishrei, when there is no Beis HaMikdash, and we are Mechalal, Nami Lav Mishum the Mitzvah Lekadosh al Hariyah. And now we're back to the question. And the question is, Mele, if you are allowed to change other, it can be 30, it can be 29. Now it makes sense. That's why you should be Mechalal, to get it right. Because if they're not going to come, you're going to get it wrong. But if you're going to tell me, like you said above, that the rule is that other Hasamach Lenisan is always deficient, then why are you Mechalal? Even without the testimony, anyways, Beis Din will declare that day Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So be it. Mitzvah lekadosh al pi hariyah does not justify chilul b'tchum. And indeed, because of this, the Gemara concludes that tiyufta, that we don't accept the rule that was sent to Mar Ukva, that other hasamach lenisan has to be deficient. We don't accept that rule. It's correct to say that in the majority of the times it was chassid, but it could have been mali. Having said all that, just for the record, all of this is in the time of the earlier, this is almost throughout the era of the Amoraim, where the Sanhedrin was still deciding every month what day is Rosh Chodesh, and every year, individually, if that year will be a leap year or not. Once we established the calendar that Hillel established, made it in a way that the other Hasamach Lenisan will always have 29 days. So this rule is a rule today, but what the Gemara is saying is that when we used to sanctify it in a Sanhedrin, and when Mashiach is going to come, we're not going to abide that it has to be that way. There's a possibility for other Hasamach Lenisan to have 30 days. Okay. Says the Gemara. Now we're going to focus a little bit on Elul Tishrei. Ki asa Ula, when Ula came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, Amar, he told the Chevre in Bavel, I want you to know that this year in Eretz Yisrael, Abrua le'Elul. Elul normally also has 29 days. Like nowadays, again, Elul has 29 days, but it's not a fixed rule, and they made an anomaly. He told the Chevre in Bavel, I want you to know that this year Elul was made into a 30-day month, but Ula really wanted to let them know that the only reason why they did it was for communal needs that the Bnei Bavel have. And Amar Ula, Yadi Chavrin Bavloi, I want my Chaverim in Bavel to know, my Tivusa Avdin and Bahadai, or a rhetorical question. Do you guys know the goodness that they did for you? And by the way, we're going to not only explain the advantage sometimes of Elul having 30 days, but we're going to have to explain why wasn't it also advantageous for Bnei Eretz Yisrael. We're going to get back to that in a moment. But first we're going to see what would be the advantage. And that's it. And Ula, so my Tivuso, so they asked him, explain, what did we benefit? Now one thing we already begin to see over here, that Beis Din has the koyach, even though they knew that Elul should have had 29 days, which means that the new moon possibly was seen the night of the 30th. It should have made the 30th Rosh Hashana. They didn't make it Rosh Hashana. They were ma'abed for communal needs. And Taka so holds Ula, that what Beis Din is allowed, the Sanhedrin is allowed, even though they know that they're going to get Rosh Chodesh off a day, post or pre, for a communal need. So Amarula, one reason is Mishum Yarkaya, for the vegetables. In other words, if they would have had Rosh Hashana on the 30th day, if Elul would have had 29 days, it would have chapped that year, that Yom Kippur. Let's begin with Yom Kippur, not Yom Tov. That Yom Kippur and Shabbos would have been back to back. Either Yom Kippur Friday and then Shabbos, or Shabbos and then Yom Kippur. And who cares? I'll tell you who cares. Vegetables, they had no refrigeration. So when you pick a vegetable out of Shabbos, you can't pick vegetables. It stays fresh for the next day, we're good. But for vegetables to stay fresh for 2 days is not so pashut. Normally they wither. So not to have 2 days, one back to back with each other, for the vegetables to be fresh, that was the reason. Now, by the way, you can argue that's not only Yom Kippur, that can be every Yom Tov. Don't forget, Yom Tov, we may not pick vegetables either. But we will see soon that there was a technique, Yom Tov. If you can cook, if you put vegetables that are not that fresh, you put them into boiling water for a moment, you take them out, somehow it's a Tchias HaMesim. So on Yom Tov, they weren't that concerned, they can give Zachanetza. But Shabbos and Yom Kippur and Shabbos, it's really Yom Kippur and Shabbos. We'll speak Shabbos, Yom Kippur you don't eat. We'll get to that in a moment. So in order to make sure to separate Shabbos and Yom Kippur, Rabbi Acha bar Chanina says, I have another reason. And that's Mishum Meisaya. If someone, God forbid, passes away, we may not bury on Shabbos, we may not bury on Yom Kippur. Guys, we just learned it wasn't Beitza, right? That on Yom Tov you can bury through a goy. But on Yom Kippur you can't, Shabbos you can't. So again, if a person passes away Friday night, even though the body begins to decompose quickly, but 25 hours later you can bury. But if you can have 2 days Yom Tov, Shabbos, Yom Kippur, back to back, then there's going to be a tremendous disgrace for the person who passed away. Now, is there a practical difference whether the reason is because of vegetables or burying of the dead? So the Gemara says, yeah. Yom Tov shechal liyos achar Shabbos, when Yom Tov falls out on Sunday. So man, I'm sorry? Thank you. Yom Kippur falls after Shabbos, meaning on Sunday. So man the Amar, that their communal need that justified them delaying Rosh Hashana was because of Messiah, then indeed Ma'abrinon. Then that would also justify, because you can't bury on Shabbos, nor can you bury on Yom Kippur. But Ulaman the Amar Mishum Yerkayam le'emas koba Elyahu. Don't forget, Shabbos, Yom Kippur. Shabbos, the vegetables are going to be fresh. You picked it out of Shabbos. It won't be fresh Yom Kippur. So what? You can't eat. For Matzah Yom Kippur, excuse me, go pick it Matzah Yom Kippur, Nish Gefrelach. L'urta Matzah Yom Kippur, l'urta Tarach U'Maisa. Yeah, I know you're hungry and you're fasting. It's not the end of the world to tell a Yid to pick the vegetables Matzah Yom Kippur and not having to change the Rosh Chodesh from when it should have been. Now, Ulaman the Amr Mishum Yerkaya, why would he not agree that Le'abre Mishum Messiah? So even when Yom Kippur falls after Shabbos, he should also delay Rosh Chodesh, thus separating Shabbos and Yom Kippur. So the Gemara says, Ella, you're right, but where will there be a practical difference? What happens now? Yom Kippur, before, after, because of Messiah, Kula Alma Moide, that you would add a day to the month to separate Shabbos from Yom Kippur. But what happens if the Kvius of Rosh Hashana is away, where a Yom Tov is going to be Samach L'Shabbos, whether you before or whether afterwards? Man the Amma Mishum Yerkaya Ma'abrinon. Man the Amma Mishum Messiah. But if the only reason is Messiah, he will say, no, you don't change the length of the month. Why? Because as we mentioned in Beitza, right? Efshe Ba'amamin, you are allowed to bury, not directly, but Amira La'akum, you can tell a guy to bury on the first day Yom Tov, to bury the dead. So therefore he felt that doesn't justify changing the day of Rosh Chodesh. Now, similarly, well, would he not agree that it's advantageous to change the date of Rosh Hashana, to separate Shabbos and Yom Tov for the vegetables to be fresh? So the Gemara answers, no. Yom Tov, you can resolve it. Efsher b'chamime, you can put vegetables in boiling hot water, and it's going to become fresh. Okay. That was the practical difference. And now, Ula said that they were ma'abedet for you, for B'nai Bavel. Why for B'nai Bavel? What? They don't have an issue of Yarkaya in Eretz Yisrael? Now don't forget, Messiah, there is no difference. But Ula was the one that said Mishum Yarkaya. So he says, that vegetables, do they stay, do they wither within 48 hours? That depends on the weather. So Lidi done for us in Bavel, since Chavil Lon Alma, it's very hot. So therefore vegetables taka will not last if it's 2 days, one into the other. So they did it for us. But Lidi do in Eretz Yisrael, Loi Chavaluhu Alma. It's more eerie, it's more mountainous. The one who said this did not live in Tel Aviv. So Bekitzer, there it can last for 48 hours.
What about today in our calendar? Can you keep a fall on Friday or on Sunday?
So, to my knowledge, Yom Kippur cannot fall not on Friday, not on Sunday. Yom Kippur is never on Friday, never on Sunday. Very good. And that's because Rosh Hashana loy adu rosh. So since Rosh Hashana cannot fall on Sunday, or on Wednesday, or on Friday, that's going to affect when Yom Kippur can fall. No, it's Yom Tov comes right after Shabbos that we have today. We call that 3 days. Yom Kippur, no. Okay. Now, where are we up to, Chevra? The premise that we have until now, the premise of Ula, Yarkaya, Messiah, is that Beis Din, forget about the year, Ibur Shana, they can be Ma'amar Chodesh, they can tell a month, they know that really the conjunction happened somewhere before day 30th. People saw the new moon. Beis Din will not declare that day Rosh Chodesh because of the vegetables, because of a communal need. Is Beis Din allowed to do it? Any. The Hatani Rabba Bar Shmuel, we're quoting a Braisa that he taught, that Yochol Kishem Shema Abre Mesashana Lutzoyrech, just like we know. And Rashi reminds us from Masechta Sanhedrin, all of the reasons, particularly making sure that Pesach and that Sukkot falls in the right season, spring and fall. That the reason why we would add a 13th month, even if we don't need to catch up all of the 30 days that every year it's around 11 day that the lunar calendar is shorter than the solar calendar by 11 days. So if it's only 2 years since the last Shana Me'uberes, it's only 22 days, you wouldn't have to be Ma'amar Shana. But there are communal needs that justify being Ma'amar Shana. You know, sometimes if it was such a rainy season or such a snowy season and the roads leading to Yerushalayim needs to be fixed, that will be another reason, for example, why they would add another Adar. Pasha, to give the government more time to fix the roads for people to make it to Yerushalayim easier. That we know you could. But the Braisa says, don't think that just like you can make an Ibur Shana for a communal need, and not based simply on the cheshbonos, on the calculations of the movements of the sun and the moon. Don't think kach ma'abrem es hachodesh l'tzoyrech. Says the Braisa, you may not. Talmud loimer hachodesh es alechem roish chodashim. The words that God told Moshe Rabbeinu. How does this Braisa interpret it? Kizere eva kadesh. When the new moon is sighted, the month must be sanctified. You have to sanctify it. So if you saw the moon, let's say on the 30th day of Elul, you got to make that day Rosh Hashana. You can't delay it. Kasha and Ulam. So first of all, Amar Rava, or we have here Amar Rav. Nah, that Braisa doesn't mean what you think it means. Loi Kashem. Kan, Ula is speaking about the need of adding a day. In other words, really the month should have had 29 days. Her Shleima, which means the moon was seen. Elama, don't declare it Rosh Hashana to separate Shabbos, Yom Kippur, Shabbos, and Yom Tov. But the Braisa is lekachay. The Braisa does not allow you, but the Braisa is saying is that if the moon was not seen, on the night of the 30th, it was not seen, and Beis Din for a communal need wants to make Rosh Chodesh a day earlier, that is what they're not allowed to do. No, it's if the moon was seen, and they're just going to delay Rosh Chodesh, that they could do for a communal need. And it makes sense. You know why? Because the moon was seen. It's when they will declare Rosh Chodesh, it's after the new moon was seen. It should have been yesterday, but it's still emes. It's the new moon. It's the new month. If the new moon did not appear yet, really Rosh Chodesh should be on day 31 for Beis Din to go ahead and to bring Rosh Chodesh in a day early, to be Makadosh it early, before the sighting of the moon. That is what the Braisa says they may not do. And now, when it comes to the Ibur Shana, you can go any direction. You can make the year, if the year has to be longer, you can make it shorter. If it's really shorter, you can make it longer. That you could do. That's what the Braisa is saying. That Yochel Kishem Shema Abraham Es Hashana ve'Esa Chodesh L'Tzoyrech. It even adds Chodesh. Kach Mekachin, only for that, for making it early, is where the Braisa says Esa Chodesh L'Tzoyrech. So Talmud Leimer HaChodesh Ez Elachem. Only Kezer Eve Kadesh. In other words, the Braisa is making one point. You cannot sanctify Rosh Chodesh prior to the sighting of the moon. Post the sighting of the moon, you can delay it by a day. Now, number one. Number two, I'll prove it to you. This is like that which Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, that Ma'aymin alo edem ala chodesh shenira bezman ela abroi. Ma'aymin means to intimidate. Which means we're saying that if the moon was takasin, Beis Din is allowed to delay the Rosh Chodesh for a communal need. How will that happen? What would you do then? Two Edom come to Beis Din and they say, I saw the new moon. You know what you can do? You can intimidate them. Intimidating them means you can start asking them so many questions that they're going to get stumped up. You can always do that. Was it here? Was it there? Are you sure? Do you have a doubt? Don't forget, if you're not saying the truth, oy gewalt. And you begin to ask details that people don't know. Or they contradict each other. Beis Din can do that. Anyone can do that. In other words, they saw it, and you can confuse them. What did you benefit? You delayed it. That's what you're allowed to do. But the other way around, you can't do. The other way around, that means if the moon was not seen, you may not intimidate witnesses to say that they saw it. Now, how is that even possible? What would you do? You would pay people to come into court? So the Achrayim explained that even when the moon was not seen, and Beis Din knows that the new moon cannot be seen, sometimes there was a cloud that was in the shape of the sliver of the moon. Sometimes the Edom come. Now, when Beis Din knows that what they saw is a cloud, they would also begin to ask them questions to make sure that they say, we don't know. So that's exactly what he's saying. That you cannot intimidate them. If you can go the opposite way around. If the Edom say they saw a cloud, and then the Edom begin to say, you know what, maybe it was a cloud. Beis Din can tell them, no. Don't go back on what you're saying. If you saw a moon, it's a moon. And if you're not going to say that, if they come to court, there's a way of getting them confident enough to say, yeah, I think it was a new moon. That is something that you may not do. Bidiyuk. So Atkan, step number 1. So here we are standing with Ula. You can delay Rosh Chodesh, but you can only delay Rosh Chodesh. You can never anticipate Rosh Chodesh. Fragt die Gemara Einiv, Sholach le Rabbi Yehuda Nisi'ah to Rav Ami, to Rabbi Ami, Hevu Yoidim. I want you to know that you call Yom of Shal Rabbi Yechanan. When Rabbi Yechanan was here, Rabbi Yechanan used to teach us that you can go in both directions. That ma'aymin alo edim alo chodesh shaloi nira bezmanei lekatshoi. Meaning, even though they didn't see it, or they're not certain that they saw it, and we know they didn't see it, if there is a communal need, you can tell them, no, you thought you saw it, that we can get the Edom to say Ro'inu. So you could go even in that direction. So Amar Abaye loy kashe, Rabbi Yechanan, which allows Beis Din for communal needs. Not only to delay Rosh Chodesh, but to anticipate Rosh Chodesh, is only in the months of Nisan and Tishrei. Since all of the holidays fall on that month, that's where you have communal needs. Like Ula was saying, Yarkaya, Messiah, and many other communal reasons. You can go both ways. But Rabbi Shua ben Levi's statement is only for the other months in the year, that there also you can delay it. Because then you're not doing something that's sheker. The new moon was seen already. You're going to be mekadesh based on the testimony of the new moon, but you just delayed it a day. But the opposite, you can't go. Says the Gemara that Rava Omar, I have another approach. That the brisa that we used in the beginning to challenge Ula, right? The brisa of Rabba Bar Shmuel, Hadatani Rabba Bar Shmuel, learn the way you learned before. Kezer Eva Kadesh means that you can never play around with the sightings of the moon. If Edom saw the new moon, you got to be mekadesh it. If Edom did not see the moon or they have a doubt, you cannot be mekadesh it. You can't go post, you can't go prior. Not like Ula. It doesn't refute Ula because that brisa is only following a das yachid, and that's achedim. Achedim does not allow for us to change the date of Rosh Chodesh for any communal need. You only manipulate leap years for communal needs, even if it's not yet meant to be a leap year, but there's a side reason. But months, they are fixed, and that's what Achedim holds. Ein bein atzeres latzeres. If you want to know what day of the week will Shavuos be, or if you want to know what day of the week will Rosh Hashana be. Now, a lunar calendar has 354 days. That's the emes. In other words, in every 29 days and a half a day, and I know there is still 793 halakim, which will pose a challenge after many years, but generally every month is 29 and a half days. So for you to get a year correct, 1 day 29, 1 month 29, 1 month 30. Amachai, 1 month 29, 1 month 30. And Azay Zakt Achedim. You know, it's every year, according to Achedim, every year, unless it's a leap year, needed to have 354. Now let me ask you a question. 7 times 50 is how much? 7 times 50 is 350. In other words, when you have a 354 year, everything falls on the same day. How many surplus days do you have? 4 days. That's it. So if you want to know when Rosh Hashana is, what day of the week, if it was Sunday, even though today doesn't fall out on Sunday, so add Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and next year it's going to be on Friday. Push it. And it's always going to be that way. Acherim would not be able to make the statement if the Beis Din would have a right for communal needs to change the length of the month. But Acherim doesn't allow for that to happen. And also, whenever they decide to make a leap year, the extra month, which we learned yesterday, is Adar Rishon, can only have 29 days. I'll make the same cheshbon. 28 is 4 cycles of 7. In a 29-day month, you're only off by 1 day in the day of the week. So add 1 day, it's 5 days. The im hoysa shana moberes, then chamisha. Okay. Says the Gemara Rav Dimi Menardo, Masne Ipcha, he heard the statement of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi in the opposite direction. That what? Ma'aymin al ha'edim al ha'chodesh shaloi nira bezmanoi. That if there was no sightings of the moon, and there's a communal need to make today Rosh Chodesh, they are allowed to intimidate the Edom to make Rosh Chodesh a day earlier, Chavra, even though no one saw the moon. But the but if the moon was seen, let's say last night, which means today should be Rosh Chodesh, they may never delay it until tomorrow. And here, what will be the logic behind that? My tamadav chafamid beis mishum mechzek shikra pashit. In other words, if no one saw the new moon last night, and 2 people come to court and they say that they saw it, we don't know that they're lying. Just because I didn't see it doesn't mean that you didn't see it. Zoisloi. But if many people saw the new moon, aher shleima, I saw the new moon, I know today is Rosh Chodesh, and Beis Din is not mekadosh it. Come on, if it was a clear night and everyone saw the new moon, what, no one came to Beis Din? People know that there's shtick over here. And okay, Atkan, the first part of today's shiur. What's the bottom line? 2 things we learned until now. These are important klalim. There was a machloikis whether Adar Hasamach Lenisan has to be fixed or not. And that's connected to the second thing we learned on Amud Aleph, because you can ask, why would it have to be fixed? Did they see the moon? Did they see the moon, or did they not? If it's always only based on the sightings of the moon, then it could be no one saw the new moon, they're going to be mekadosh it the next day, which is taka the next part. In other words, there were calculations that they knew. As the Rambam recorded it for all of us, we are able now to make a calendar, because we are taught in Torah Shabbal Peh. It was concealed by most people then. It was only recorded in the Braisos called Soit HaIbur. That's cryptic. We know all of the movements of the sun and the moon vis-a-vis the earth. To know whether the moon will be seen, where it will be seen, whether it won't be seen. We know how to make those cheshbonos. On top of that, we learned Ula, we learned Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, other than Achedim, which we don't paskin like Achedim, that aside of the knowledge of the movements of the sun and the moon, which will enable us to foretell when will the conjunction, when will the moon be exactly under the sun. And a moment after the conjunction, the new moon is born. And again, as we'll see in a few lines, and if you are in a very advantageous location, you will already be able to see it 6 hours after the conjunction. In certain places in the world, you'll be able to see the new moon. Herst, there are communal reasons why you might delay it. And said Shmuel, Amar Shmuel, that Yochilna litakune lekula goyla, that my knowledge, both of all of the movements of the sun and the moon, and all of the reasons why the Beis Din would delay a month, they would anticipate a month, I'm so familiar with it, that even though the shluchim that we just learned about never reached far areas from Eretz Yisrael, took them much longer to find out what day was Rosh Chodesh, Shmuel was confident, I will always know when they made it Rosh Chodesh. And you know what he's saying with that, Shleima? And therefore, don't have to keep 2 days Yontif if you're near me. I'm telling you when they made Rosh Chodesh. Now that's a tremendous amount of knowledge. So Amar le Abba, the father of Rabbi Samloi, to Shmuel, yeah, you know everything? Tell me something. Yoda mai har milsa, tell me that cryptic clause that it says in the Braisos called the Soit HaIbur, and these are the words there. Noilet koidem chatzois, oy noilad achar chatzos. That there is a difference whether the moilad happened before midday or whether it happened after midday. What does this mean? So Amar Loy, I don't know what that means. So Amar Lei, so Abba, the father of Rab Simloi, tells Shmuel, here's the chayin. If there's even only one line in that cryptic brayso known Soito Iber that you don't know what it means, so maybe there are other things that you don't know what it means. You don't know it all. How can you be certain that you're going to know when the Sanhedrin declared Rosh Chodesh? Mida hala yadamar ikemilachre niyasa also the yadamar. And indeed, so that was that. And Taka, and until they established a calendar, no matter how learned one was, or in how close proximity did you live with Shmuel, who was the greatest master in the rules of Kiddush HaChodesh, if we didn't hear from the Shluchim that they established that day Rosh Chodesh in Yerushalayim, we Taka kept 2 days Golus. And then onwards, Minek Aviseinu B'Yodein.
Did Shmuel Taka himself only keep 1 day? Is that what we're saying here?
L'chayra, after he was pushed back by Yavua, he also didn't. In other words, he said, theoretically, I know how to do it, and they told him, no, you don't know it all. Now we have to touch what that means. Now we became curious. What does Soida Ibr mean when it says that there's a difference whether the new moon was before midday or whether it was after midday? Let me just say a few words like this, Chevra. That, again, the sun and the moon are both moving every day. The sun is moving and the moon is moving really from west to east. Vis-a-vis the mazolas, let's just accept these words. The sun is moving around 1 degree a day in relation to the mazolas, to the constellations, and the moon is moving 13 degrees a day from west to east vis-a-vis the mazolas. Or if you're just looking at the sun and the moon is running quicker than the sun 12 degrees a day, approximately. Now what that means is that for the first half of the month, the moon will always be to the east of the sun. That's what you need to remember. Think about this. In the first half of the month, the moon will be to the east of the sun. So let me ask you a question. When will you see the new moon? Let me tell you the challenge of seeing the new moon. It's very little. If the sun is up in the sky, the light of the sun overwhelms, blinds the little light of the moon. If the moon, Chavre, is to the east of the sun, do you know when you will always see the new moon? We will walk home from shul. At night. The new moon is only visible at night because you need sunset. The moon is to the east. Sunset is always in the west. Sunset is in the west and moonset is in the west. Sunrise is in the east. Moonrise is in the east. So after the sun goes down, the moon is still on the horizon. So it's dark. The moon is not that far behind the sun. It's only outrunning it 12 degrees a day. But if it outran the sun a little bit, since after sunset the moon is still up in the sky, that's where you begin to see the new moon in the western horizon. Now let me go on the opposite. Towards the end of the month, the moon is always to the west of the sun. To the west of the sun. So therefore, when it comes to sunrise, what comes up first? Same thing. The moon will come up first in the beginning, at the end of the month, because it's towards the west. And we're speaking about before sunrise because at the end of the month, the moon is also very little because it's getting closer and closer to the sun. For you to be able to see even a little moon, you need to have darkness in the horizons. So by sunset, the moon set before the sun. You're not going to see the little moon at the end of the month because the sun is still up in the sky. So the end, the old moon is going to be seen in the eastern sky. And the new moon will be seen in the western sky. You're good? Simple. Okay, now let's read it inside.
Very simple. Perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense. Kisal like Rab Zera went to Eretz Yisrael. Sholach Lahu. He told the Bnei Bavel, I learned another Soid Ho'iber clause, which also has to be explained. And that is that Sarich Sheyehi Laila V'yoim Min HaChodesh. That it's necessary, Chevra, that the night and the following day be part of the same new month. What does it mean with that? Look inside the Rashi. It's mamish to the left. It's 11 lines from the top of the Amid. Tzarech sheyei laila v'yoyim min hachodesh. That since the day for Jewish people follows the night. Hayoim hoylach achar alayla lihiyois hayoim min hachodesh shahoya boy leil shalafanav. The day today has to follow the same month of the night before it. Meaning, what does he mean by that? Lamadnu she'im nireis halavana hayishana. If last night, like we just mentioned, the old moon, if they saw the old moon last night, she'im nireis halavana hayishana mishach hashecha, which means Yom Esrem v'Tisha Shulel Shloishim. Last night, the only days that you can't make Rosh Chodesh the 29th day. Rosh Chodesh earliest is the 29th going into the 30th. So if last night they saw the old moon, you can never say today is Rosh Chodesh. Ein mekachin oiseh b'yom shloishim. If last night you still saw the old moon, so last night was from last month, the day has to follow the night. Hold on. Asks Rashi, who needed that statement? We just mentioned what the Gemara is going to say in a few lines, that between the disappearance of the old moon and the appearance of the new moon, it's at least 24 hours, at least. It can never be with the naked eye before that. If the old moon was seen last night, that means that the earliest you're going to see the new moon is already at night. The Beis Din is closed. So who needed that statement? Let's read inside Rashi. Ve'im toimer pshita de'ein mekachin. On day 30th, the new moon, you will not see the new moon on day 30 if the old moon was seen on day 29. Because the Kaimelon, as we will learn in a moment, that Esrim Ba'arba Sho'i, that for our full 24 hours, Mechasi Sihara, the moon is completely concealed. Don't forget, the moon becomes concealed even before the conjunction. When the old moon is already so close to the sun, you can't see it. And even after the conjunction, it takes a while to see the new moon. So you need 24 hours. So what is he saying? I heard something achidish, that if the old moon was seen last night, since by a Yidden, the day goes after the night. If last night was the old month, you can't make today the new month. If the last night people saw the moon, no one is going to see the new moon. So answers Rashi, that's why we learned Chaf Amid Beis after Chaf Amid Aleph. What did we learn today? We learned today that we don't follow Achedim. We learned today that if there are communal needs, Beis Din can play around with Rosh Chodesh. Play around is the wrong word. They have the right to declare Rosh Chodesh even before the new moon was seen. So on this, Rab Zeir is saying, Bamet Dvaram Amurim, that no one saw the new moon last night, the old moon last night. If the old moon was seen last night, I don't care the communal need. You cannot anticipate Rosh Chodesh. That's why he needed to make that statement. Let's go back.
The moon is actually there. You just cannot see it. Like in these 24 hours.
Yeah. But I'm saying, but the fact that you saw last night the end of the old moon, you cannot make today Rosh Chodesh, even if there's a communal need.
How would they know if anyone saw the old moon? No, who's testifying about the old moon?
No, everyone sees it. Let me say better, Danny. Beis Din knows the real movements of the sun and the moon, and they know that it was visible. And if it was visible, then it was seen. That's the presumption. And I can tell you right away that no matter where you are in the world, if the moon is within 6 hours of the Moiled, no one will see it in Eretz Yisrael. Does everyone see it if it's only 6 hours away? Not everyone also. Certain places you need 18 hours to see it. And I'll explain why 6, why 18 in a moment. Let's keep on reading in the Gemara. So that was din number 2. And now when Abzeda was in Eretz Yisrael, he also sent back, now he's going to explain the statement. Now he's going to explain this clause from the Soid HaIbur, that also, Vezu sha'amar Abba avua de Rab Simloi, that mechashven es toiladetoi, that Beis Din will calculate exactly when will be the real conjunction, when will the moon be directly under the sun. The Braisa is telling you that if noilat koidem chatzois, however, we're speaking about Eretz Yisrael. This is so important because this is all done in Eretz Yisrael. If the new moon, if the conjunction happened even a moment before midday, Shleima, Nachamol, when do we see the new moon? Remember, the new moon is going to be seen the earliest by Shkia time, the end of the day. So if you have 6 hours between the real conjunction and sunset, even if it's 6 hours and a minute, it's shaykh to see the new moon that day, right before Shkia. After I know that really you would say the sun needs to fully set. It's not true. Even before the sun really sets, it gets dark. The horizon gets dark. And sometimes, even though the new moon is that little, if you had the 6 hours, it's shaykh to see the new moon on that day before Shkia, which means theoretically, they can go to the Beis Din right there and right away say we saw the new moon, and they can be Mekadosh that day to Rosh Chodesh. That's the meaning of the Soy to Ibr. That if in Eretz Yisrael the real Moilad happened before midday, then the Yodua Shenira Samach L'Shkias Achama. Then we can be certain. Biyodua means that it could be seen. Now it can be cloudy, could be the sun before sunset was very bright. There's other reasons for that. But it's shaykh, in other words, if witnesses say to the Sanhedrin right before sunset, oh, I see the new moon, and Beis Din knows from their own calculations that the real conjunction happened a moment before midday, then you're good. Because you have the minimum 6 hours. If the moilad did not happen before midday, we're going on the presumption that Shkia is 6 p.m. Okay, and during that time of the year. So then, if we know the moilad really happened a moment after midday, the new moon will not be seen on that day. It will not be seen. It will not be seen because it's too little when the moon is above the horizon. Don't forget, the moon is also setting. By the time the moon set, you're not going to see it until...
You have 6 hours?
No, less than 6 hours. So that's the meaning of the Soy to Ibr. This is only for Israel, not for Babel, as I'll explain in a moment. In other words, the Brais is saying that Beis Din is being Mekadosh based on the testimony of witnesses, but Beis Din needs to know the emes, whether they really saw it or not. Sometimes they're not lying on purpose. They saw a cloud, they got confused. So you know that if in Israel, the Moilad was even a moment before Chatzos, when Shkia is 6 p.m., if you had 6 hours before Shkia, it's shaykh for the new moon to be seen. If the Moilad was only a moment after midday, they did not see it. And Lamay Nafkamina, Amar Rabashi, La'akhush Asadi. So if witnesses come and they say that they saw the new moon, now that we have this rule that you can never see the new moon if you're not at least 6 hours from the conjunction or more. So if witnesses come, we can contradict them. And it's very easy for Beis Din to contradict them. You know, you just begin asking a million questions and until they get confused, and then we dismiss their testimony. Now, Amar Rab Zayda, Amar Rab Nachman, Chav Dalet Shoy, for a full 24 hours, this is what we just quoted in Rashi before, Machasi Sihara, the moon is going to be completely concealed. Don't forget, it's not only that it takes time to see the new moon, at the end of the old moon, same concept, once the old moon is so close, my friends, to the sun, that means it's such a little sliver that's reflecting light to us, you no longer can see it. But a total from when the old moon disappears from our naked eye until when the new moon appears, there's always going to be 24 hours. Now, how do we divide it? How do we divide the 24 hours? It's not the same. Guys, we are still referring to the case where the Moilad was right before noon. Now, let me just add one more detail to appreciate the next few lines. When the Moilad is right before noon, the Moilad has nothing to do with the time zone that you're in. Because the Moilad has to do with the sun vis-a-vis the moon, vis-a-vis the Mazolas, where are they at? When they are aligned, or when they have their conjunction, they have their conjunction. The time zone for me will only mean when will I see it? Now Bavel is to the east of Eretz Yisrael. It's not that far away. But you should know today we can know this precisely. Bavel is 36 minutes ahead. Ahead means that if it's 12 p.m. in Eretz Yisrael, at that moment in Bavel it's 12:36. That makes all the difference. That makes all the difference. That means that if the new moon was seen right before Chatzos in Israel, if the Moilad happened right before noon in Eretz Yisrael, you're taka able to see the new moon 6 hours later. When are you going to see the new moon in Bavel? 18 hours later. Why 18 hours later? Because if the Moilad happened within 36 minutes of Chatzos in Eretz Yisrael, that means in Bavel it happened already afternoon. Even 12:01. If it happened afternoon, in Bavel, by the time 6 hours, you need 6 hours, by the time the 6 hours passes, the moon already set. Prior to that, they can't see it yet. So when will they see it again? Like we mentioned, you will not see the new moon in the sunrise, because the moon comes up before by the time, because the sun comes up before. Because the moon is to the east of the sun, you will only see it by sunset. You will have to wait until tomorrow, Shkia. So he's saying this, Lididu, for Eretz Yisrael, all you need when the Moilad is right before noon is only 6 hours to pass for you to see the new moon. But let me ask you the same thing, Shleima. When did they see the old moon last? It goes in the opposite direction. Since in everything that we said regarding the 36 minutes ahead, that will have the opposite effect on seeing the old moon. Because the old moon is only seen by sunrise. By then it was too late. They will only see it another 12 hours to 18. V'tamya Sreima Atikan 18 hours of the old one. In other words, the old moon disappeared for them 18 hours. Then you had the Moilad right before noon, and the Taka were able to see the new moon 6 hours later. So they needed those 24 hours. And Lididu, Lididan, for us in Bavel, I skipped a line. For us, same thing. For us in Bavel, they only need 6 hours from the old one. Whenever the Moilad will really happen before Chatzos, right before Chatzos, which means what? I'm just going to opposite direction. If the Moilad happens before Chatzos in Israel, when did the Moilad happen in Bavel? 12:36 or 12:35 or 12:35 p.m. That's great. Because that means that if they go 6 hours earlier, the moon is already in the sky, and the sun is not going to take away from its light. There was enough of the moon going up in the old month. In the old month, the moon is towards the west. In the old month, the moon is to the west. That means that there's a moonrise before sunrise. So they managed to chop a moonrise when it's still within 6 hours of the Moilad. Because don't forget, the key is just 6 hours. If it's within 6 hours, you can't see it. The moonrise was more than 6 hours before the Moilad. So they were able to see, even though it's only 6 hours and a bit from the old moon, they can still see it. But they need, like we mentioned, 18 from the new one, like we mentioned, in Bavel, because the Moilad was 12:36, 12:35. So they need to wait until tomorrow night. And the opposite is in Eretz Yisrael. And Lamay Nafkamina again, Amar Avashi, like Chusha Sadi. Like Chusha Sadi. Pashit, if they begin to ask questions and we, let's say, we know, it's about what we know. It's all about this one line gives it all away. That as long as in Eretz Yisrael, the Moilad happened right before midday, it's possible that they have seen it 6 hours later, that same day. If it was after midday, then there's no way they can see it. Okay. Amar Mar, let's hop one more line. The master taught us that that Rab Zera taught us that even though we justify the Beis Din is allowed for communal needs to declare Rosh Chodesh when it's not really Rosh Chodesh, but like we mentioned, if the old moon was seen last night, back then these are the cheshbonos, and we will know whether you were able to see the old moon last night, whether you are in Bavel, whether you just need to make sure that it's 6 hours away from the conjunction, and there has to be the moon has to be either above the horizon or before the horizon for you to see it. Oh, how do you know that? So Rabbi Yechanan learns it from Psukim that we have regarding Yom Kippur, where it says, Me Erev Ad Erev, the pasuk concludes, Tish B'su Shabbatchem, Me Erev Ad Erev. Reish Lakish Amar, you know how I know that the day must follow the night? Because it says regarding the Pesach and the prohibitions of eating chametz and the reshus of eating matzah, until when do you eat matzah? Ad yoim ha'echad ve'esrem lachodesh bo'erev, until 21 in the night. That's where you see that by us, Yom Hoylach Achar Alayla. My benayu, if you bring the pasuk from Yom Kippur or if you bring the pasuk from Matzahs, from Pesach, so Abaye says there's no halachic difference. It's only Mashmois Darshan Ika benayu. Sometimes we simply want to know where do we derive it from. But Rava Amar, no, the huge difference. Chatzois Laila Ika benayu. There's an nafkamina. What's the nafkamina? If the source is from the pasuk in Yom Kippur, there it's Me'erev Ad Erev. The night begins when it gets dark. And then the day follows the full night. If you're quoting me a pasuk from Pesach, you know what the emes is? That there is a huge difference between eating matzah during the whole Pesach versus the first night. The first night, there's an obligation to eat matzah until midnight. From midnight and on, it's only reshus. And on this reshus eating matzah, where the Torah says eat matzah until the night of the 21st, when did it begin? Only chatzois. So says Rava Gavaldik. Again, we know that if you saw the old moon, no matter where you are, you won't be able to see the new moon until 24 hours later. We know that. But we also know that Beis Din has the right for communal needs to declare that day Rosh Chodesh, even if no one saw the new moon. But then we learned, but there's a limit. They can't do it if people saw the new moon the night before. What happens if the new moon, the old moon was seen between Shkia and Chatzois midnight? The old moon was seen. We're following the rule of Rab Zera. If the source of the statement of Rab Zera is from Erev Aderev, since the old moon was seen between Shkia last night and midnight, the next day may never be declared Rosh Chodesh, even you have the most important reasons. But according to the other source, according to Reish Lakish, we learn it from the mitzvah of eating matzah. The mitzvah of eating matzah, the shus, only began midnight. I know midnight 7 days before, it doesn't matter. So he's going to hold that even if the old moon was seen last night, if it was seen before Chatzois Halayla, then for communal needs, the Beis Din could declare tomorrow Rosh Chodesh. That will be the nafka mina. God willing, to be continued.